Hook, when power, jealousy, and family secrets collide within palace walls, even the most carefully guarded royal chambers cannot protect against betrayal from within. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble corridors of Raven's Hollow Palace as Prince Alexander stormed through the gilded hallways, his footsteps echoing with barely contained fury. The youngest heir to the throne had always been known for his calm demeanor, but today something had shattered that carefully maintained composure entirely. Lady Evangeline, the palace's head of security, hurried alongside him, her usually pristine uniform slightly disheveled from the morning's unexpected drama. She clutched a detailed report in her trembling hands, knowing that what she was about to reveal would send shockwaves through the entire royal household. "Your Highness, please allow me to explain the situation more thoroughly," she pleaded, struggling to match his determined pace. The circumstances surrounding this morning's incident are far more complex than they initially appeared. Alexander came to an abrupt halt before the ornate doors of his wife's private quarters, his jaw clenched with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Princess Isabella's chambers had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the relentless pressures of royal life and find solace in her personal belongings and cherished memories. Complex. Alexander's voice carried a dangerous edge that made several passing servants quickly avert their eyes and hurry past. "You're telling me that my stepmother was found rifling through my wife's most private possessions, and you call that complex?" The truth was far more scandalous than anyone could have imagined. Queen Cordelia, who had married Alexander's father just 3 years prior, had been discovered by the night security guard at precisely 4:30 in the morning, standing amid Isabella's personal effects with several items scattered across the Persian rug. Lady Evangeline cleared her throat nervously, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard by curious palace staff. The guard, Thomas Whitmore, reported that Her Majesty appeared to be searching for something specific. She had opened several jewelry boxes, examined personal correspondence, and was holding Princess Isabella's private diary when he discovered her. Alexander's hands balled into fists at his sides. The very thought of Cordelia violating his wife's privacy in such a brazen manner filled him with a protective rage he had never experienced before. Isabella had been struggling with the pressures of royal life lately, and her private chambers were the one place she could truly be herself. "Where's my wife now?" Alexander demanded, his voice low and threatening. "Princess Isabella is currently in the East Wing with her ladies-in-waiting. She remains unaware of this morning's incident," Lady Evangeline replied carefully. "I thought it best to inform you first before deciding how to proceed with this delicate matter." The political implications of this scandal were staggering. Queen Cordelia had married King Edmund during a time of great upheaval in the kingdom, and many had questioned her motives from the beginning. She was significantly younger than the king, beautiful, and had arrived at court with very little family background or wealth. Many suspected she had married for power rather than love. Alexander began pacing before the chamber doors, his mind racing through the possible motivations behind Cordelia's shocking behavior. "Tell me exactly what Thomas saw. Leave out nothing, no matter how insignificant it might seem." Lady Evangeline consulted her notes, her voice growing steadier as she recounted the guard's detailed testimony. Thomas was conducting his routine early morning rounds when he noticed a faint light coming from beneath Princess Isabella's door. Protocol dictates that these chambers should be empty during those hours, as the princess typically sleeps in the master suite with you. She paused, gathering her courage before continuing with the most damaging part of the report. When Thomas knocked and received no response, he used his master key to investigate, fearing a possible security breach. He discovered Queen Cordelia kneeling beside the princess's writing desk, with several drawers pulled open and their contents spread across the surface. Alexander felt his blood pressure rising with each word. The image of Cordelia systematically searching through Isabella's private belongings was almost too much to bear. And what exactly did she say when confronted? That's where the situation becomes even more troubling. Your Highness, Lady Evangeline admitted reluctantly. Queen Cordelia claimed she was looking for evidence of Princess Isabella's alleged correspondence with foreign dignitaries. She specifically mentioned concerns about the princess's loyalty to the crown. The accusation hit Alexander like a physical blow. Isabella's loyalty had never been questioned before, and the suggestion that she might be engaged in treasonous communication was not only absurd but potentially devastating to her reputation and their marriage. Foreign dignitaries? Alexander repeated, his voice filled with incredulous anger. What foreign dignitaries? Isabella barely corresponds with anyone outside the immediate royal family. Lady Evangeline shifted uncomfortably, clearly reluctant to continue. Queen Cordelia specifically mentioned Prince Dmitri of Valdoria, Your Highness. She claims to have seen letters bearing his seal among the princess's possessions during previous social gatherings. Prince Dmitri was Isabella's cousin, and their families had maintained a cordial relationship for decades. The idea that their innocent family correspondence could be twisted into evidence of disloyalty was both absurd and deeply troubling. Alexander's mind raced as he began to see the broader implications of Cordelia's actions. If she was attempting to undermine Isabella's position within the royal family, it could only be for one reason: to strengthen her own influence over King Edmund and the royal succession. Has my father been informed of this incident? Alexander asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Queen Cordelia specifically requested that we handle this matter discreetly until she could speak with King Edmund personally, Lady Evangeline replied. She claimed that involving too many people would only create unnecessary palace gossip and potentially damage the monarchy's reputation. The manipulation was becoming clearer by the moment. Cordelia was attempting to control the narrative surrounding her shocking breach of privacy, positioning herself as a concerned stepmother protecting the crown rather than the trespasser she actually was. Alexander turned toward the chamber doors, his decision made. I want to see exactly what she was examining. Open these doors immediately. As Lady Evangeline produced the key with trembling hands, Alexander steeled himself for what he might discover inside his wife's most private sanctuary. The morning's revelations had already shattered his trust in his stepmother, but he suspected that the worst was yet to come. The heavy doors swung open to reveal Isabella's beautiful private sitting room, but the usual serenity of the space had been completely destroyed. Drawers hung open, papers were scattered across multiple surfaces, and several of Isabella's most precious possessions lay carelessly abandoned where Cordelia had examined them. Alexander stepped into the chaos, his heart breaking as he saw the violation of his wife's most personal space. This wasn't the random searching of a concerned stepmother. This was the methodical investigation of someone looking for specific information to use as a weapon. The revelation of Queen Cordelia's intrusion had set off a chain of events that would forever alter the delicate balance of power within Ravenshollow Palace. As Alexander stood amid the destruction of his wife's private sanctuary, he began to piece together a pattern of suspicious behavior that had been building for months. Princess Isabella arrived at her chambers an hour later, having been summoned by her husband's urgent message. The moment she saw the chaos that had once been her carefully organized personal space, her face went pale with shock and anger. "Someone has been through everything," she whispered, her voice trembling as she surveyed the damage. "My letters, my jewelry, even my private journals. Nothing has been left untouched." Alexander wrapped his arms around his wife, feeling her body shake with the violation she was experiencing. "It was Cordelia," he said quietly, his voice filled with barely controlled rage. "She was caught by the night guard going through your belongings at 4:30 this morning." Isabella pulled back from his embrace, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Cordelia? But why would she do such a thing? What could she possibly have been looking for?" Before Alexander could respond, Lady Evangeline appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. "Your Highnesses, I'm afraid the situation has become significantly more complicated." Queen Cordelia has requested an immediate audience with King Edmund, and she's brought several items from these chambers as evidence of her concerns. The blood drained from Isabella's face as she realized the full implications of the morning's events. What items? What has she taken from my private rooms? Lady Evangeline consulted her notes reluctantly. According to the inventory compiled by Thomas Whitmore, Queen Cordelia was observed taking 3 letters bearing foreign seals, a small leather journal, and what appeared to be a piece of jewelry with an unfamiliar crest. Isabella's hand flew to her throat as recognition dawned in her eyes. The letters from Dmitri about grandmother's estate, my diary from our honeymoon trip to Valdoria, and the family pendant that belonged to my mother. She's taken items that could be completely misrepresented when viewed out of context. Alexander felt a cold fury building in his chest as he understood the calculated nature of Cordelia's theft. These weren't random items. They had been specifically chosen to create a narrative of disloyalty and foreign influence that could potentially destroy Isabella's reputation and position within the royal family. We need to reach my father before Cordelia has a chance to present her twisted version of events, Alexander declared, but even as he spoke, they could hear the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside. King Edmund appeared in the doorway, his weathered face bearing an expression of deep concern and disappointment. Behind him stood Queen Cordelia, looking appropriately distressed while clutching a small collection of Isabella's stolen possessions. Alexander, Isabella, the king said solemnly, his voice carrying the weight of his years and the burden of what he believed he had discovered. I'm afraid we need to discuss some very serious allegations that have come to light this morning. Queen Cordelia stepped forward, her performance of concerned loyalty nearly perfect as she addressed the younger couple. I take no pleasure in bringing these matters to light, but my duty to the crown and to this family must come before any personal feelings. Isabella found her voice, despite the shock and violation she was experiencing. Your Majesty, I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding about the nature of my personal correspondence and possessions. But King Edmund raised his hand for silence, his expression growing more severe. Cordelia has presented me with evidence that suggests you may have been engaging in unauthorized communication with foreign powers, specifically regarding sensitive matters of state and royal succession. The accusation hung in the air like a poison, threatening to destroy everything Isabella had worked to build since marrying into the royal family. Alexander stepped protectively in front of his wife, his own loyalty to the crown warring with his need to defend the woman he loved. Father, with all due respect, I believe Queen Cordelia has gravely misinterpreted some completely innocent family correspondence, Alexander said, his voice carefully controlled despite the fury burning within him. The items she has taken from Isabella's private chambers tell a very different story when viewed in their proper context. Queen Cordelia's eyes flashed with something that looked suspiciously like triumph, though she quickly masked it with an expression of hurt surprise. Alexander, I understand that loyalty to your wife is admirable, but we cannot allow personal feelings to blind us to potential threats against the monarchy. Isabella stepped forward, her royal training finally, overcoming her shock at the morning's betrayal. Your Majesty, I would be honored to explain the true nature of every item that has been taken from my chambers. I have nothing to hide, and I believe that transparency will quickly resolve any concerns about my loyalty to the crown and to this family. King Edmund studied his daughter-in-law's face carefully, looking for any sign of deception or guilt. After 30 years on the throne, he had developed a keen ability to read people, and something in Isabella's direct gaze began to soften his initial suspicions. Very well, he said finally, let us examine these items together and allow you to provide your explanation for each one. Queen Cordelia's confident expression faltered slightly as she realized that her carefully planned revelation was not proceeding as smoothly as she had hoped. She had counted on King Edmund's immediate acceptance of her concerns, but His willingness to hear Isabella's side of the story threatened to expose the weakness in her accusations. The first item was the correspondence with Prince Dmitri, which Isabella explained with calm dignity. These letters concern the settlement of my late grandmother's estate in Valdoria. Dmitri, as my cousin and the executor of her will, has been keeping me informed of the legal proceedings. The family properties and heirlooms mentioned are part of my inheritance, not matters of state security. King Edmund examined the letters carefully, noting the personal tone and the obvious family business being discussed. The formal language that Cordelia had interpreted as diplomatic coded communication was clearly nothing more than legal correspondence between relatives. The second item was Isabella's private journal from her honeymoon, which contained her personal thoughts about visiting Valdoria as Alexander's bride. Queen Cordelia had suggested that the detailed descriptions of the country's defenses and political climate indicated intelligence gathering for hostile purposes. Your Majesty, Isabella said with quiet dignity, this journal contains my private thoughts and observations as a new bride experiencing her husband's ancestral homeland for the first time. The descriptions are those of a tourist, not a spy. Alexander took the journal from his father's hands, his own anger building as he read passages that had clearly been taken completely out of context. Isabella's innocent observations about the beauty of Valdorian castles and the friendliness of the people had been twisted into evidence of suspicious intelligence gathering. The final item was the family pendant, which Queen Cordelia had suggested might be a communication device or symbol of divided loyalty. Isabella's explanation was both simple and heartbreaking. This pendant belonged to my mother, who died when I was 12 years old, Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion. The crest is that of our family's ancestral home, and I wear it to remember her love and guidance. It has no political significance whatsoever. As King Edmund examined each item and heard Isabella's explanations, his expression began to change from suspicion to confusion, and, finally, to a growing anger that was clearly directed not at his daughter-in-law, but at his wife. Queen Cordelia sensed the shift in the room's atmosphere and made one final desperate attempt to maintain her position. Edmund, surely you can see that even innocent-seeming correspondence can be used to establish dangerous connections. The security of the realm must be our primary concern. But King Edmund's eyes had hardened as he turned to face his wife of 3 years. Cordelia, what I see is a clear violation of privacy, theft of personal property, and a serious breach of trust within our family. These explanations are completely reasonable, and your accusations appear to be entirely without merit. The moment of truth had arrived, and everyone in the room could feel the tension building toward an inevitable confrontation that would determine not only Isabella's fate, but the future balance of power within the royal family itself. The confrontation that followed would be remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in the recent history of Ravenshollow Palace. King Edmund's realization that his wife had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to undermine his daughter-in-law sent shockwaves through the carefully maintained facade of royal harmony. Queen Cordelia's face had gone pale as she watched her carefully constructed accusations crumble under the weight of Isabella's reasonable explanations. The evidence she had been so confident would destroy her stepdaughter's reputation had instead revealed her own jealousy and manipulation. Cordelia, King Edmund said, his voice carrying the full authority of his position as monarch, I am deeply disappointed by your actions this morning. Breaking into Princess Isabella's private chambers, stealing her personal possessions, and making false accusations against a member of our family is completely unacceptable behavior. The Queen attempted one final desperate defense of her actions. Edmund, please understand that everything I did was motivated by my concern for your safety and the security of our kingdom. I genuinely believe that these items indicated a potential threat. But Alexander had heard enough of his stepmother's lies. You claim to have seen these letters at previous social gatherings, but Isabella's correspondence with Dmitri is kept in her private chambers. You would have had no way of knowing about them unless you had been systematically spying on my wife for months. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. If Alexander was correct, then Cordelia's invasion of Isabella's privacy wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a much larger pattern of surveillance and manipulation. Lady Evangeline, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. Your Majesty, if I may, there have been several incidents over the past few months that might be relevant to this discussion. King Edmund turned to the head of security with growing concern. What incidents? Why wasn't I informed about them previously? Several staff members have reported seeing Queen Cordelia in various parts of the palace during unusual hours, Lady Evangeline explained carefully. At the time, we assumed she was simply having difficulty sleeping or exploring her new home. However, in light of this morning's events, those reports take on a different significance. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that her sense of being watched and having her privacy violated hadn't been mere paranoia. What areas of the palace was she visiting? Lady Evangeline consulted her ever-present notes. The servants reported seeing Her Majesty near the correspondence office where international mail is sorted, outside Prince Alexander's study during his private meetings with advisors, and on multiple occasions in the wing housing the family's personal quarters. The implications were staggering. Queen Cordelia hadn't just violated Isabella's privacy. She had been conducting a systematic campaign of espionage against multiple members of the royal family, gathering information that could be used to advance her own position or eliminate perceived threats to her influence. King Edmund's face had grown increasingly thunderous as the full scope of his wife's betrayal became clear. How long has this been going on, and why wasn't I informed immediately when the first suspicious incident occurred? Lady Evangeline's professional composure finally cracked slightly. Your Majesty, Queen Cordelia specifically requested that these matters be handled discreetly to avoid creating palace gossip. She claimed to be concerned about the monarchy's reputation and asked that any unusual observations be reported directly to her rather than through normal security channels. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Cordelia had effectively neutralized the palace's security system by positioning herself as the primary recipient of information about her own suspicious activities. Alexander turned to face his stepmother directly, his voice filled with a cold fury that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. How long have you been planning this? How long have you been looking for ways to discredit my wife and undermine our marriage? Queen Cordelia's mask of concerned loyalty finally slipped completely, revealing the calculating ambition that had driven her actions from the beginning. You have no idea what it's like to watch your husband's affections remain divided between his new wife and his precious son and daughter-in-law. Everything I did was to protect my position in this family and ensure my own security. The admission was a devastating confirmation of everyone's worst suspicions. Cordelia had married King Edmund, not out of love, but as part of a calculated plan to gain power and influence within the royal family. When she realized that she could never truly replace Alexander and Isabella in the king's affections, she had resorted to sabotage and false accusations. Isabella, who had remained surprisingly calm throughout the entire confrontation, finally spoke with a quiet dignity that demonstrated her true royal character. Your Majesty, I believe the evidence speaks for itself. Queen Cordelia has violated my privacy, stolen my possessions, and made false accusations against my character. The question now is how we proceed in a way that protects both the monarchy's reputation and ensures that such behavior never occurs again. King Edmund looked at his daughter-in-law with new respect and admiration. Despite being the victim of a vicious campaign of harassment and false accusations, Isabella was thinking about the broader implications for the royal family rather than seeking personal revenge. You're absolutely right, Isabella, the king said, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision he knew he had to make. This behavior cannot be tolerated, and there must be consequences that reflect the severity of these actions. Queen Cordelia's eyes widened with fear as she began to understand that her position in the royal family was in serious jeopardy. Edmund, please consider what a scandal this could create. Think about how the press and the public would react if news of this incident became public knowledge. But Alexander stepped forward with a proposal that would solve multiple problems at once. Father, I believe Queen Cordelia would benefit from an extended retreat at the family estate in the countryside. A period of quiet reflection away from court life might help her reconsider her priorities and her commitment to our family's values. The suggestion was diplomatic language for exile, and everyone in the room understood its implications. Queen Cordelia would be removed from the palace and from any position where she could continue to harm other family members, while the official explanation would protect the monarchy from scandal. King Edmund nodded slowly, recognizing the wisdom of his son's solution. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Cordelia, you will depart from Millbrook Estate this afternoon and remain there until further notice. Lady Evangeline will ensure that all of Isabella's possessions are returned immediately, and a full investigation will be conducted into any other security breaches that may have occurred. Queen Cordelia's face crumpled as she realized that her gamble had failed catastrophically. Instead of destroying Isabella's position in the family, she had destroyed her own. Edmund, please don't do this. I can change. I can be better. Give me another chance to prove my loyalty to this family. But the damage was too severe and too calculated to be forgiven easily. King Edmund's voice was final as he delivered his judgment. The trust that forms the foundation of any family has been shattered by your actions. Until you can demonstrate genuine remorse and a commitment to change, you cannot remain in this palace. As Queen Cordelia was escorted from a room to begin her preparations for departure, the remaining family members stood in the ruins of Isabella's private sanctuary, processing the magnitude of what had been revealed. Isabella began the process of carefully collecting her scattered possessions, each item a reminder of the violation she had experienced. Alexander worked alongside her, his presence offering comfort and support as they began to restore order to the chaos that Cordelia had created. King Edmund watched his son and daughter-in-law working together with a sense of profound gratitude that their marriage had survived this attack. Isabella, I owe you a sincere apology for doubting your loyalty, even briefly. Your grace under pressure and your concern for our family's reputation despite your personal suffering demonstrate the kind of character that makes you truly worthy of your position. Princess Isabella looked up from her task of reorganizing her correspondence, her eyes bright with unshed tears of relief and vindication. Your Majesty, family members sometimes disagree or have misunderstandings. What matters is that the truth ultimately prevails and that we support each other through difficult times. As the afternoon sun began to set over Raven's Hollow Palace, Queen Cordelia's carriage departed for her exile in the countryside, carrying with it the consequences of her jealousy and ambition. The royal family had survived a serious threat from within their own ranks, but they had also learned valuable lessons about trust, loyalty, and the price of unchecked ambition. In the weeks that followed, palace security procedures were completely overhauled to prevent any similar breaches in the future. Lady Evangeline implemented new protocols that would ensure all suspicious activities were reported through proper channels, regardless of who might be involved. Princess Isabella's private chambers were restored to their former beauty, but she chose to add new security measures that would protect her personal sanctuary from any future violations. The experience had taught her that even within the supposedly safe walls of the palace, constant vigilance was necessary to protect one's privacy and dignity. The scandal was kept from public knowledge through careful management and discretion, but its effects rippled through the palace staff and noble families who were close to the royal household. Queen Cordelia's exile served as a powerful reminder that position and marriage could not protect someone from the consequences of betrayal and manipulation. King Edmund, chastened by his wife's deception and his own brief doubt of Isabella's loyalty became more protective of his son and daughter-in-law's happiness. He made it clear to everyone at court that any future attempts to undermine their marriage or position would be met with swift and severe consequences. Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella's relationship emerged stronger from the crisis, having weathered a serious attack on their trust and privacy. They had faced the threat together, supported each other through the investigation, and demonstrated the kind of partnership that would serve them well in their future roles as leaders of the kingdom. The morning's shocking discovery of Queen Cordelia's trespassing had ultimately revealed far more than anyone had expected. Not just one woman's jealousy and ambition, but the true character and strength of the relationships that formed the foundation of the royal family's future.